This 2-minute routine is virtually guaranteed to increase your work-life balance. So if you're watching this or listening to the episode, you probably are a business owner, high performer, or somebody who works in a competitive, stressful job. But you also probably have other obligations outside of business. And you've probably run into this issue where you work all day, you have all these things you're excited about, you're stimulated by, and then you get home and you just can't shut your brain off. This probably results in you feeling rushed, feeling not present, sometimes overwhelmed, and it's just like this constant program that's running in the background. So this is something that I personally have experienced, and it's something that keeps coming up in my one-on-one coaching sessions with business owners, and I want to share a strategy that helped one of my recent clients. And what he kind of described to me is that he just felt like he was constantly on the go, and then when he would go home with his young kids, he was just not present at all, kind of just not showing up the way that he really wanted to. And so I think what this really does is it highlights the importance of mastering your transitions from one thing to another. I remember when I worked at an ed tech startup, one of the executives, she was so busy when I looked at her calendar. And one meeting would be talking about like the 3 to 5 year long-term vision of the company. And then the meeting right after that would be all about the like nitty-gritty details on like a product feature. And it was just slammed back to back to back. And I asked her how she does this. And what she told me is she told me that she's mastered the art of transitions. And this is where you have to like quickly transition from one thing to the next and then just be fully present with that one thing. And that was the kind of like the first time that I had heard it. I've also read some books from Brendon Burchard. His book, High Performance Habits, talks about the importance of mastering transitions. And so when I was working with my client, the first thing that I asked him is I said, tell me about your transition routine. And he's like, what do you mean by that? So that is the first question that I would ask you if you are struggling with this as well. What is your transition routine from the end of the workday to beginning the family day or the next activity? Because you want to ask yourself a few questions, like what time are you going to shut down? If you are focused and doing deep work for multiple hours at work, you also need to give your mind and your body the same amount of rest for recovery. So that's kind of like the first thing to think about is what time are you going to shut down? And then the next thing is what routine can you follow to set up this transition? So one of the things that I talked about with one of my clients is I asked him, how does he want to feel when he goes home, when he sees his wife, when he sees his kids? And the main thing that he told me is he just wants to be present and engaged. And so then I asked him, what are the things that you've done in the past to help you feel present and engaged? And we started coming up with a list of all the potential things that he could do. Sometimes he would play like video games. Sometimes he would go for a walk. Sometimes he would exercise. Sometimes he would meditate. And what we nailed down was actually just starting with his breath and just taking 6 deep breaths. When he got in the car, drove home, was about to go into the house, what I would have him do is just take 6 intentional deep breaths and then say something to help him get primed, to help him be present and engaged. And so that was the routine. It was at the end of the day, he shuts down, he drives home, he takes 6 intentional breaths once he stops his car, and then he says, I'm going to be present and engaged when I go through that door. And then he goes in and he shows up that way. And it's something that honestly takes less than 2 minutes. When you think about taking a few breaths, collecting your thoughts, and setting an intention, that's something that can be done super quickly. And that's so important here because what we want to do is we want to identify something that you can do consistently. And the thing that you can do consistently is the thing that is short, that is concise, and it's repeatable and scalable, something that can become a system and a pattern. And we started doing that. And once we understood when he was going to shut down, what he was going to do as his transition routine, the next thing I asked him is like, how are you going to hold yourself accountable? How are you going to know that this is what you need to do in the moment? And so we started to track that activity, and he shared it with me so that I can provide that accountability. So once he implemented that, he came back to our last coaching call, and I asked him, like, how has that gone for you? And he was like, it's kind of crazy, but it feels like this has changed everything for me. You know, before he would come home and he would just be overwhelmed and stressed and not really have any sort of routine. And he felt like his kids would almost feed off of that. But since he's coming home and doing that routine and just feeling a lot more present and engaged, he says that he feels like the whole energy of the house has shifted. And this highlights an important point, which is just sometimes the smallest things can actually have the biggest changes. And that's why I'm doing this episode, is just I want to share this, because this is something that I get consistently from business owners, executives, and leaders, where you just have a hard time shutting off. And so as I bring it back to you, I hope that this process is helpful and it helps you think about, number one, like, what is your transition routine? Because if you don't have one, or you don't even know what that means, I want to challenge you to implement this like today or this week by answering those 3 questions. What time are you going to shut down? What specifically are you going to do to transition from work to your family life? And then number 3, how can you hold yourself accountable to make it repeatable, to make it consistent, and to make it a system? And these are the types of things that I help my clients with in a one-on-one and group fashion. And so if this is something that you want help implementing, or you want some other ideas of like how you can overcome the overwhelm, the stress, the anxiety, and have a better work-life balance, then just DM me or comment on this YouTube video, and we'll have a conversation. So thanks. I'll see you all in the next one.